Unexplained and Sinister, 3 spine-chilling true school horror stories that will haunt you forever. Jessica's heart raced as she fiddled with the threadbare apron tied around her waist. The diner was almost empty, the flickering neon sign outside casting eerie shadows on the walls. Just last week, Ethan had started receiving chilling texts from an unknown number, every message more sinister than the last. The laughter he shared with his friends about the abandoned school-'s haunted past felt less like harmless fun and more like a countdown to something terrifying. "Mom, I'm fine," Ethan insisted one evening, a nervous laugh dancing in his voice as he fidgeted with his phone. But those wide eyes betray the truth. Something was wrong. Each night Jessica watched him grow more distant, more anxious, while crickets sang mournfully outside, the breeze carrying whispers that didn't belong to their suburban sanctuary. The once comforting hum of their home faded into the background, replaced by an oppressive silence that settled into her bones. The texts were becoming relentless. "They're coming for you. You should be never gone near the school." Jessica shivered as Ethan shared each one, like peering into a dark abyss. She tried to stay calm, urging him to ignore the threats, but they reinforced a creeping terror in her heart. Their home felt haunted, laughter echoed hauntingly in the halls now, shadows crept along the walls, and the very air thickened with unshakable dread. Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closing in. She tried to push the thoughts aside, but strange occurrences began piling up, chairs askew, lights flickering, the air charged with whispers that sent shivers down her spine. Was she imagining things, or was something lurking just beyond her sight, something that was watching? Her heart thudded in her chest like a hammer, drowning out thoughts of her weariness from the night shifts. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. One unsettling night, Ethan didn't come back when he was supposed to. Panic seized Jessica as she raced through their quiet streets, the dim streetlights casting ghostly shadows. Every instinct screamed for her to find him, to draw him back from the abyss that seemed to have snatched her son. She drove to the abandoned school, the hulking figure looming before her like a dark omen. The odd flickers of lights inside beckoned, almost taunting her. As she stepped inside, the air chilled, suffocating her with a sense of dread. The whispers grew louder, unearthing memories of secrets never shared, tragedies buried beneath decades of neglect. Broken windows rattled as Jessica moved deeper, adrenaline flooding her senses. Ethan's name hung in the air like a spell, slicing through the darkness. But just as she reached a room where the whispers seemed to converge, a realization struck her with paralyzing clarity: the danger wasn't just here. The malevolence slithered belonging to the faces she saw every day. Was it her neighborhood? Friends? Could she trust anyone? The walls of the abandoned school felt almost alive, pulsating with dark energy, and all she knew was that the haunting had just begun. What lurked in the shadows? What had Ethan stumbled into? She gripped the doorframe, knowing the truth was more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. Jessica moved deeper into the school, every footstep echoing ominously. The air was thick, suffocating her with a sense of lost hope. She could feel something lurking just beyond reach, a darkness that twisted in the corners of her vision. The lights flickered again, plunging her into temporary darkness. A cold sweat trickled down her back. "Ethan," she called, her voice breaking the heavy silence, echoing dismally in the empty hallways. The response was nothing but the soft rustle of long-forgotten paper and a chill creeping through the air. Panic clawed at her throat as shadows danced just out of sight. Suddenly, a laugh emerged from somewhere deep within the school, a chilling sound that sent waves of dread rippling through her. It was not her son's laugh. It twisted and turned, sounding almost playful yet unearthly. Jessica pressed on, driven by fear, determination pushing her forward despite the warning bells ringing in her head. She approached what used to be the cafeteria, the smell of dampness heavy in the air. The room was dark, but she could see shapes moving slightly, a group huddled together, whispering secrets lost to the ages. Jessica squinted, claiming back the fleeting hope that perhaps Ethan was there. But as she stepped closer, the shapes twisted, revealing faces distorted by shadows, by fear or regret. "Run," Jess, one of them seemed to mouth, though she heard no sound. Her heart sank. These weren't just students, they were souls trapped in this cursed place, their eyes hollow and pleading, yearning for escape. "Ethan! Where are you?" She shouted again, owned by desperation, the weight of his absence screaming in her head. The faces echoed her name, urging her to leave, warning her. "Don't stay." Before she could comprehend the urgency, a figure rushed past her. She caught a glimpse of a familiar sweatshirt, a flash of blue. "Ethan!" She yelled, heart racing, instinctually chasing after him. It felt like a game of tag, but this time the stakes were life and death. The corridor twisted and turned, leading her deeper into an abyss, the walls closing in. The whispers grew louder and more persistent, echoing painful truths, all the while urging her to return, to escape. "Ethan!" She screamed. Finally, she burst into a dim room, and there he was. But something was off, his eyes were glazed, staring blankly ahead. The room seemed to warp around her, distorting the light. "Ethan!" She repeated, shaking him, panic rising like bile in her throat. He blinked slowly, as if waking from a deep sleep. A flash of recognition crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by abject terror. "Mom, they're here," he whispered, voice trembling. And in that eerie moment, Jessica felt a cold breath against her neck. From the shadows, figures began to emerge, their faces obscured, but she could see the glint of malevolent intent in their eyes. The air around her buzzed ominously, crackling with energy. "What do you want?" Jessica shouted, trying to hold her ground. But they only stepped closer, lips curling into sinister smiles. "You shouldn't have come," the chilling sound threaded through the darkness. Jessica's heartbeat thundered in her ears as the darkness closed in. She grabbed Ethan's hand. "Run!" she commanded, but terror locked them in place. The oppressive weight of despair bore down as raw fear surged. In that moment, an unbearable truth pierced through her desperation. What if they were never to escape? Suddenly the lights buzzed back to life, blanketing the room in stark illumination. But the ghosts, shadowy figures of students, neighbors, all those lost remained. It was as if the darkness itself had solidified back into human shapes, their whispers enveloping the room once more. Ethan and Jessica stood frozen in terror as the chilling realization settled in: this wasn't just a haunted school. The horror was part of their lives, woven into their very existence. In a rush of adrenaline, they made a break for the exit, but could escape ever truly be an option? Right as they reached the door, Jessica turned back for one last look. The figures stood still, watching. One of them raised their hand, beckoning eerily. "You can't leave," they whispered in unison. "You've always belonged to us." Staggering backward, dread coursed through her. What had they unleashed? What could come next? With the looming specters surrounding them, a horrifying thought pierced her mind: was there any refuge left? Jessica's heart raced as she took one step back, then another. Each movement backward was weighed down by the oppressive aura of despair radiating from the figures. Ethan tugged at her hand, his grip trembling with fear, yet his eyes were steadfast, urging her to flee. "Don't look at them," he rasped, pulling her toward the door, their only path to freedom. The moment stretched painfully as she forced her feet to move, the figures now a chorus of whispered threats, their voices overlapping, blending into a cacophony of dread. "Stay with us forever," the chant dripped with malice, embedding itself deep in their minds as they scrambled through the door. But the air outside didn't feel like safety, it felt like a trap waiting to close. "Mom, we need to get to the front," Ethan shouted, glancing over his shoulder. The shadows stirred behind them, their laughter swirling in the air like a gust of wind carrying echoes of memories untold. They sprinted down the hallway, shadows fluttering in their wake, but uncertainty gnawed at Jessica. Where could they run? She reached a junction where the hall split into 3 paths, neon exit signs flickering uselessly in the dim light. Which way? Panic seeped into her voice. The front. It has to be the front. Along the left path, she could hear another low giggle, unmistakably teasing and twisted. Jessica's instincts screamed against it, pulling her toward the right, the direction she could feel the most warmth as if escape glimmered faintly ahead. Each breath was labored, every footfall a drumbeat of fear. They veered right, pressing themselves against the peeling walls as they rushed past classrooms filled with skeletal desks and sunken chairs. The air thickened with desperation, time felt elastic. Every corner they passed shimmered with the uncertainty of what chased them. Trapped in her own thoughts, Jessica felt a fog of paralysis wash over her. "Ethan, what if they get us?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "They can't, Mom. Just keep going." His confidence rang hollow, echoed by the laughter spilling from somewhere deep within the recesses of the school. Suddenly, a door swung open just ahead, revealing darkness that seemed to pulse with a heartbeat of its own. An unsettling, magnetic pull urged them inside. "Jessica!" A familiar voice called from within. It was a frantic, needy whisper that froze her steps. Was it her mind playing tricks? Against every survival instinct screaming to turn and run, she couldn't help but approach. "No, Mom." Ethan pulled at her sleeve, but the voice deepened, only growing more desperate. "Help me, Jess, please." In that instant, the shadows behind them twisted, contorting into a low growl that reverberated through her bones. The figure in the doorway became distinct, a shadow of her former self, one she recognized but couldn't accept. "Mom, we have to leave." Ethan's voice cracked, fear raw in it now. She hesitated, torn between the pull of urgent familiarity and the horror encroaching rapidly. A cold breeze curled around her, and suddenly, the realization hit: this wasn't just someone calling for help. This was a trap laid for them, an echo of trauma designed to lure her back. The sinister smiles of shadows emerged beside her one more time, feeding off the turmoil within her. "Run!" The urgency in Ethan's tone broke through the fog, grounding her to the moment. They darted away from the door, breaking free from the spectre's grasp. But the growl morphed into a cacophony of voices, their lost cries blending into a hellish melody of despair. "What do we do?" she gasped, wild-eyed. The front exit was now blocked, shadows oozing forward, hunger glistening in their darkened eyes. "Up!" Ethan pointed toward a staircase spiraling upward in the darkness. "We can hide." They sprinted up the steps, the laughter of the figures chasing them echoing louder. It filled her with primal fear, amplified through the dimly lit corridor leading to an uncertain fate. At the top, they burst into a room filled with broken furniture and dust. It looked like an auditorium. They were alone. Suffocated by silence, yet the shadows were inching closer. The world outside remained out of reach. Ethan turned to Jessica, his voice shaking. "What if they find us here?" Her breath caught. It was a question laden with dread, one that reverberated against the walls filled with their secrets. And as the temperature dropped, a single thought lingered: were they truly safe, or had they simply stumbled into a darker trap? Just then, something rustled behind a tattered curtain. Jessica could feel it, eyes watching from the abyss, waiting with wretched anticipation. "Mom," Ethan whispered, the shadows inching nearer. And in that bleak moment of realization, Jessica wondered, was there any way to fight the darkness, or had they already become part of it? The rustling intensified, tumbling through the silence of the room like a specter prowling for prey. Jessica's heart thundered in her chest, the sound as loud as the echoes of their desperate escape. She glanced at Ethan, whose pale face was illuminated by the dim light spilling in from the broken window, casting ghostly shadows that danced ominously around them. "Stay close," she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. Her own fingers were slick with sweat, a cold reminder of the terror that enveloped them. The stage in front of them loomed large, dressed in tattered curtains and dust-covered remnants of performances long gone. It felt like a graveyard for forgotten dreams. As the rustling continued, an alternate fear flashed in her mind. The danger wasn't just outside, it was here, inside, lurking in the dark corners of the room. "Ethan, I think we should," but before she could finish, the curtain tore open with a sudden movement, revealing a black void beyond. For a fleeting moment, Jessica thought she saw a figure, a child, perhaps slumped against the wall, every feature obscured by a heavy cloak of shadows. It was as if the nightmares had taken form, sulking within the dark. "Help me," the child's voice came, soft yet chilling, each word bouncing around the auditorium like a ball made of ice. Ethan gasped, gripping her arm tighter. "Mom! That's not real." His voice trembled, a mix of disbelief and fear welling within him. But Jessica felt rooted in place. "What if it is someone who needs us?" she countered, trying to fight against the very instincts that warned her to flee. "No. They're lying." He pulled harder on her sleeve, trying to drag her away from the encroaching darkness. His young face, so full of terrified determination, brought clarity back to Jessica. She needed to protect him, not chase fantasies that could lead them to danger. With a sudden surge of resolve, she yanked Ethan toward the staircase again. "We need to go now." They stumbled backward, taking one step toward the promise of escape just as the figure slipped into the shadows and vanished. The laughter of the trapped shadows morphed into a piercing wail, a cacophony that filled the air, blocking their way forward and back. "Where do we go?" Ethan whimpered, eyes wide with panic as the shadows crept closer, swirling around their legs like tendrils of smoke. "Up. We keep going up." Jessica's voice was raw, desperation fueling her as they darted back toward the staircase, the only source of salvation. With each step, the very structure underfoot seemed to shift. The stairs creaked ominously, each sound echoing, merging with the cries that clamored for their attention. "Mom!" Ethan's voice broke through the haunting sounds. "What if we're just going deeper into it?" A chilling truth lay in his words, gnawing at her core. Was this a nightmare they would never escape? The shadows were relentless, and an unseen weight pressed down as they ascended. At the top landing, they found themselves facing another door, worn and weathered, almost like a portal to another realm. Hesitation coursed through Jessica as she placed her hand on the doorknob, the cold metal biting against her warm skin. "What if it's worse?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling again. But they couldn't go back. They were trapped in a labyrinth of fear, and the only option was forward. With every ounce of strength, she twisted the knob and pushed the door open. The unknown awaited them on the other side, a realm that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, drawing them in with a sickening allure. The moment they stepped inside, everything shifted. The air thickened, the walls seemed to pulse, and distant echoes of children's laughter taunted them from unseen corners. Jessica looked to Ethan, who searched her eyes for reassurance. Hope flickered like a fragile candle. Yet, in this new space, something about the laughter felt wrong, off-key, drenched in a darkness she couldn't fully grasp. "Maybe we should," but before she could finish, the door swung closed behind them with a crash, sealing them in darkness. Familiar. Shadows took shape, morphing at the edges of her vision. Threads of fear tightened painfully in her chest as laughter burst forth again. The voices now sounded familiar, haunting echoes of those lost to the darkness. "Jessica, they're here. We need to leave," Ethan cried, his eyes wide with horror. But Jessica was paralyzed, feeling the weight of the past flooding back. This place, was it truly a trap, or had they stumbled into something far worse? Where she was cut off by the shadows closing in, each ghastly face emerging with vivid clarity, ready to claim their prey. The laughter grew, a ghastly symphony echoing off the walls. Desperation mixed with an overwhelming sense of defeat. And in that moment, as shadows surged forward once more, a horrifying question lingered in her mind: could they find the light again, or were they now destined to join the haunted whispers in this realm of despair? The air was heavy and thick, charged with a feeling that pressed against Jessica's skin like a warning. Shadows twisted and coiled around them, whispering secrets only they could understand. Each step deeper into this murky space felt like crossing into a forbidden realm, one that had no intentions of letting them go. What is this place? Ethan's voice trembled, strained like a thin wire ready to snap. Even the laughter had faded, replaced by a suffocating silence that made every breath feel like a risk. Jessica turned, forcing herself to meet his frightened gaze. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The age of the walls around them seemed to pulse, as if alive. They were ancient witnesses to 1,000 sins. Instinctively, she pulled Ethan closer, shielding him from the enveloping darkness that felt like it was watching them waiting. Suddenly, a flicker of light danced ahead, drawing Jessica's eyes. The flicker was faint, like a candle's ember in a cavernous darkness. Hope flared momentarily. There. She pointed. Maybe we can find a way out. But as they moved toward the light, it began to dart away from them, taunting, flickering just out of reach. The false hope sparked a fluster of panic. The laughter returned, louder, as if announcing their futile chase. They broke into a sprint, both of them panting, hearts hammering against their ribs. Don't look back. Jessica urged, the red flags of fear screaming in her mind. The shadows surged, pursuing them like predators on the hunt, and the laughter morphed into something darker, more sinister, a cacophony of cries steeped in agony. Just as they neared the flickering light, it blinked out, plunging them into total darkness. Jessica stumbled, catching herself just before hitting the ground, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Ethan's small hand squeezed hers, a lifeline in the abyss. "Mom!" he cried, panic spiraling through his voice. "Shoo, it's okay," she murmured, though her own heart raced with mounting dread. "We can find it together. We just need to focus." As they stood, the darkness seemed to shift, morphing into shapes that jutted out around them, twisting figures of despair, draped in shadows and memories too painful to recall. Jessica's mind raced as the breath caught in her throat. What if this is their home? She thought, wrestling with the horror of it. What if they want us to join them? Suddenly, the laughter turned into wails, shrieks of anguish that pierced her heart. Time slowed to a crawl as those mournful cries sank into her bones. In that moment, horrifying faces emerged, caught between the living and the dead children, young and innocent, their eyes wide and pleading. "Help, help us!" echoed each voice, layering over another until the room shook with lamentations. The haunting sound was like a drill vibrating in her skull, filling her with dread. "No! I can't!" Jessica screamed, feeling herself begin to crumble. "Ethan, we have to find the door. We need to get out." But as she turned, the walls around them shifted grotesquely, the space beginning to flatten. Desperation clawed at her chest, forcing her to choose between facing the agonized faces or running into the unknown. "We can't stay," she cried, pulling Ethan down what felt like the only corridor left. The shadows slithered closer, shrieking, demanding her attention. The children were pleading. Was this the fate that awaited them? Would they be trapped forever between the world of the living and the agonies of the lost? The corridor narrowed, and the ghastly laughter swallowed their footsteps. Jessica bumped against something solid, a door, cold and unyielding. She fumbled for the knob, heart pounding as the shadows arched closer, terror becoming tangible. "Help us!" The voices wailed again, sounding oddly like Ethan. "No! I won't let them take you." Panic surged through Jessica like a wildfire, and she pushed against the door with all her might. It swung open wildly, flinging them both into a blinding light. But as they rushed through, Jessica caught one last glimpse of the faces of the children melting into the darkness, their desperate eyes locked onto her own as if entrusting her with their fate. In the aching silence that followed, Jessica and Ethan found themselves standing in what appeared to be another auditorium, eerily similar to where they had just fled. The grinding dread settled in her stomach, and the shadows felt close behind them. "Mom?" Ethan whispered, terror painting his young features. "What if we're back where we started?" The door behind them slammed shut, sealing their fate. Jessica turned, a weight pressing against her chest. What is happening?" A flicker of movement caught her eye. The same fleeting shadow from before, a childlike figure, half a step into another world, beckoning them. In that heart-stopping moment, Jessica faced a terrible truth: this nightmare wasn't over. Rather, it had only just begun. The air crackled with tension as Jessica scanned the shadowy auditorium. The dim light cast eerie shapes against the walls, warping her perceptions of reality. Ethan clutched her hand, his small fingers trembling. She wanted to reassure him, to tell him they were safe, but the growing chill in her bones suggested otherwise. "Do you see that?" Jessica pointed to the flickering figure on the far side of the room, a ghostly silhouette that seemed all too familiar. It danced and twirled, calling them closer. For a fleeting second, the deep-set fear within her wavered as curiosity took root. "Let us go, Mom," Ethan said, pulling her forward. But Jessica hesitated. Something about the way the figure moved struck a chilling note deep within her. "No, Ethan. We need to stay together," she whispered, clenching his hand tighter. As if responding to her unease, the room began to shift again. The walls warped, curling inward as though they were alive, intent on snatching their hopes. The figure stopped, only to tilt its head, revealing hollow eyes that seemed to beckon and taunt at once. "Come play with us," its voice echoed, a chilling whisper that sent shivers down Jessica's spine. "No!" she shouted, stepping back. "We're not playing." The echoes of her own voice drummed against the walls, bouncing back as if mocking her defiance. But the figure did not relent. Instead, it stretched forth a little hand, eerily inviting, glows flickering along its edges. Jess could see those nightly eyes glimmering, small incantations of fate, urging her to take a step closer. Ethan's small voice broke through her internal struggle. "Mom, please. It wants to help. We can't stay here." Another pulse of dread hit Jessica, a sensation that clawed at her heart. What if that was their only chance? Suddenly, laughter erupted again. The sound was joyful, twisted, a congregation of children's glee mixed with something more sinister, something that stirred panic. Shadows flared, and Jessica felt an unseen force pushing against her, forcing her toward the chilling figure, while Ethan's grip faltered, his tiny hands slipping away. "Ethan!" She turned, her voice cracking as she watched him wander forward, drawn toward the glow like a moth to a flame. "No! Come back!" Jessica screamed, taking a desperate step forward. The room spun, the figure now morphing, its shape shifting into something grotesque. Its laughter changed, took on a darker overtone, a choir of tortured souls, the echoes of the lost entwined in its cacophony. Jessica's heart raced. Images whirled in her mind, memories of joy twisted into nightmares. Suddenly the shadows surged, pinching her in their collective grasp. Panic clawed at her throat as she felt herself being pulled back, as if the very darkness of the room feared her refusal to surrender. Help us, that haunting mantra filled the space once more, louder and more desperate than before, a plethora of voices, all drowning in anguish. "No, please, Ethan." The shadows rippled, shadows merging with light, swallowing the childlike figure whole. With each heartbeat, time stretched, and horror overtook her senses. She could see Ethan, his small silhouette growing distant, his eyes wide with fear. "Mom! No!" Jessica lunged, adrenaline surging through her veins. She pushed against the dark, the cold seeking to ensnare her, and sprinted toward him, but the moment seemed eternal. The closer she got, the quicker he retreated, the laughter now boiling, raging like a storm that threatened to engulf everything she loved. The world shifted again. The auditorium walls closed in, brimming with despair and malice, threatening to extinguish whatever light remained in this encroaching darkness. As she reached for Ethan, darkness quenched the last remnants of hope. Everything seemed to whirl and fade, until she was left in a void, echoes of his terrified screams fading into an unforgiving silence. And then she heard it, a soft, sinister whisper climbing the edges of her consciousness. "Join us." The world flickered back into view, but this time, it wasn't just an auditorium. It was a long, empty hallway littered with crumpled papers and echoes of laughter that didn't belong to her son. And standing at the far end, Jessica could see figures in the shadows, waiting, watching, one kneeling closer to the ground, small and innocent. "Mom," Ethan's voice broke through, but was it truly him? Could it be? What awaited her next? Jessica stood frozen, her heart pounding as terror rooted her to the spot, begging for her to run, to do something, but the choice felt so far away. Jessica's breath hitched in her throat as she squinted into the gloom. The hallway stretched endlessly, its darkness thick enough to claw at her skin. Shadows flickered at the corners of her vision, shapes that danced just outside her focus. Each heartbeat resonated like a drum, echoing off the cracked walls, blending with the cold remnants of laughter that filled her ears. "Ethan?" she called, her voice trembling. Was that really him? He shouldn't be here. The flickering shadowy forms flanking the hallway felt wrong, an insidious presence that twisted her gut. "Mom!" The cry echoed again, but it held no urgency, just an unnatural calm. Distorted images of children peering from behind the walls left her feeling more unsettled. They wore hollow, empty smiles, their faces ghostly pale against the dark. "No! Stay back!" Jessica shouted, instinctively moving forward, only to feel an invisible barrier push against her chest, a heavy weight that shackled her in place. Each step came with desperate determination, her legs shaky, but her resolve ignited. The answer came swift, rushing around her like wind. A soft whisper danced at her ears, an enticing call, "Join us, Ethan." She strained against the pull of the shadows, feeling their cold grips tugging at her sanity. "Where are you?" And then, in the depths of her despair, she saw him kneeling. The unmistakable outline of her son, small and vulnerable, only a few steps away. But as she turned to run, the path twisted grotesquely, brimming with darkness that swallowed her tracks. From the shadows, the figures moved closer, circling her, their whispers growing louder, merging together into a cacophony of childlike voices saying, help us," the air thickened, suffocating her with dread. Every instinct screamed to flee, but she couldn't turn away, not while there was hope that this figure was indeed her son. "Ethan!" She stumbled, nearly falling against the wall, its surface cold and slick with something that felt like fear. The child lifted his head, the smile on his face now twisted, forcing horror into her heart. "Mom, they're waiting for what?" The question flickered in her mind, but it barely registered amidst the turmoil. She choked back panic, wanting desperately to reach out to him. But fear twisted her thoughts, and she knew, deep down, that something was terribly wrong. An overwhelming guilt clawed at her. "I want to leave you," she cried, stepping against the darkness, struggling against it, searching her memory for every lesson, every warning. "Remember the game we played? The one about being brave?" There was a flicker of recognition in his hollow eyes, the sense of their bond nearly tangible. Be brave, Mom. In a flash, Jessica was flooded with memories, the happier times spent together, when the world felt safe. But right now, that safety felt like a cruel trick. The figures cackled, eyes gleaming with a sickly light, inching ever closer as their collective weight pressed down on her. "Ethan!" She shouted again, the desperation forcing her to fight through the darkness where the walls seemed to hum with energy, vibrating with the laughter that wasn't theirs, but echoed painfully like a memory twisted into a nightmare. Suddenly, she felt a strong pull. It wasn't just the darkness. It was the genuine warmth of someone reaching back from the shadows. "Mom! Help us!" Her breath caught. Behind Ethan, a portal glimmered, a swirling maelstrom of promise and peril. It beckoned, it charmed. "Jessica," the voice murmured again, sweetly deceptive. What was inside? Crammed with memories, hopes, or was it something more sinister? As she weighed her options, the pressure from the darkness around her built into a maddening roar. Was she ready to sacrifice everything, to step closer to her son, or was that merely the bait she couldn't resist? "Jessica!" That voice again, clear amidst the chaotic swirl, urging her on. Mom, did she dare? With every fiber of her being screaming no, desire clawed at her throat to break free and reach Ethan. And just at that moment, the children's laughter grew. Deafening, drowning her thoughts, twisting the air. The hallway twisted around her, and as she stretched out her hand, the shadows surged, enveloping her once more. Was there still time to choose? Fear coiled tight in her stomach, pulling her deeper into the unknown. As the shadows wrapped around her, a chilling thought emerged. What if Ethan wasn't the only one who needed saving? And then came that final whisper, "Join us." What would she do next? Jessica stood frozen, heart racing, as the whisper echoed in her ears. The shadows pulsed, breathing life into her growing panic. "Join us." It felt like a weight pressing on her chest, demanding compliance, promising something just beyond her reach. But could she trust it? "Ethan!" she forced out, her voice cracking. The shadows flickered, shifting, as if anticipating her decision. In that moment of hesitation, the darkness seemed to solidify, coiling tightly, hungry for her fear. She took a shaky breath and locked eyes with the figure hunched on the floor. It looked like her son, but the glimmer of recognition had dimmed behind those eyes. "We have to go, Ethan." Murmurs filled the air, echoing her name, "Jessica, Jessica." It was an enticing lullaby threaded with laughter that stung her ears. The children figures hovering in the dark stretched their hands toward her, limbs impossibly long and jagged, writhing like serpents. "Help us," they begged, voices soft yet commanding. Torn between the spectral figures and the horrifying sight of the boy she loved, Jessica felt the walls closing in. Without breaking her gaze on Ethan, she took a small, tentative step forward. The weight intensified. It pressed against her throat, a cold, clammy hand squeezing tighter, and she fought to breathe. "Please, Ethan. Say something. Do you want to come with me?" The boy's face twisted into an unsettling grin. "They don't want you to leave, Mom." Jessica felt her heart plummet. "What do you mean? You're not safe here." Panic laced her words, spilling over in violent waves. Desperation clawed at her insides as the shadows crept closer, each whisper curling around her mind, suffocating her resolve. Suddenly, Ethan's demeanor shifted again, his eyes gleaming with a ghostly light. "We can stay forever," he said, the way he spoke sent icy chills racing down her spine. "No!" she yelled, fear burning bright through her. "You're not one of them. You can't want this." In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere shifted. The whispers grew louder, more demanding. "Join us! Join us!" The ground trembled beneath Jessica's feet as the hallway warped, rippling like water disturbed by a stone. Ethereal laughter filled her ears, swirling around her like a tempest, drowning her reason. "Mom!" Ethan's voice rang out again, sharper, laced with something venomous. "You don't need to be afraid. You can be like us." He gestured toward the swirling darkness, and the other children closed in, their eyes burning with hunger. Jessica's pulse raced. Was this truly her son? The boy she had loved so fiercely? Every memory, every hug, was under siege by this growing monstrosity. The shadows enveloped her, wrapping around her ankles, tugging her down into a bottomless void. A moment of clarity pierced the chaos. If she stepped deeper into the dark, there might be no way back. She screamed, "I refuse." With all her might, squirming against the masses. With every ounce of her strength, she reached out, fingers trembling, searching for her son one last time. Then, through the chaos, a flicker of something familiar emerged, a warmth that cut through the chill. It was a fleeting image, her Ethan, fear shimmering in his eyes. She slammed her hand down on the ground, trying to ground herself, to fight through the shadows. "Help us." The voices attacked, more urgent. "Join us. Be one with us." Tears streamed down her face, mixing fear with a fierce determination. "No. You can't take my son." But even as the strength surged inside her, the shadows clawed back, relentless, desperate. It felt like syrup, thick and heavy, holding her in place, dragging her deeper into its abyss. She screamed again, the sound echoing, trembling with her last hope. The shadows tightened their grip, threatening to swallow her whole. Just as despair threatened her resolve, she spotted Ethan amongst the churning chaos, a small, trembling figure, his smile faltering, a glimmer of the boy she knew breaking through. "Mom. Please." His voice wept through the void. In that instant, Jessica felt a flicker of something beyond panic, a fire deep within her. Was the warmth around her growing, or was it simply the last bit of her resolve? And as she lunged forward, desperation filling her lungs, the laughter shattered into agonized wails. The portal behind Ethan flickered and glimmered, a beacon of hope wreathed in treachery. It revealed the last piece of the puzzle. "Mom, they're not who they seem." With a final push, she reached for him, feeling the shadows grow frantic, desperate to claim them both. What would she sacrifice to get him back? Drawing in a breath, Jessica steadied herself and cried out, "Ethan. We need to fight them together." The darkness swirled violently around them, a chaotic tempest ready to twist her resolve one last time. Would they break free or be consumed entirely? "Join us," the shadows hissed once more, confusion reigning in their whispers. Jessica's hand shot out, poised for a fight against the unknown. But would she dare to grasp at salvation, or was the darkness too powerful to resist? What secrets would the shadows reveal next? The shadows writhed with a mind of their own, tugging at Jessica's ankles with desperate fingers, whispering promises that twisted her stomach. The fearful realization sank in. The darkness was alive, and it wanted more than just to claim Ethan. It craved her as well. "Ethan!" She screamed, pulling against the suffocating grip of the shadows, forcing more words between shallow breaths. "Trust me. We can be free." The boy hesitated, his form flickering as if he were both there and not there. "They make it feel so good," he murmured, his voice a haunting echo that made Jessica's insides churn. A part of him was still there, a part that was wavering in the face of the shadows' enchanting promises. "Fight it!" she shouted, urgency carving her words into the air. The other children loomed closer, their mouths stretching into grotesque smiles. They were no longer just echoes of innocence, but twisted nightmares, eyes black as soot, burning with a hunger that made Jessica's gut turn. With an instinctual jerk, she lunged forward, reaching her hand out toward Ethan. She could barely glimpse his small frame flailing against the rasping darkness. For a moment, she swore she saw him shake his head, fighting against the pull of the dark. "Mom!" He looked back, and in that instant, she could see the boy she had raised. The boy who loved dinosaurs, who laughed at her terrible jokes. I don't want to join them." "Yes." Jessica's heart raced with hope. "That's it. You're stronger than this." The shadows recoiled, howling as if struck, twisting tighter around her in a frenzy. But she would not let them take him. The warmth she had felt just moments before surged again, crackling like electricity between them. She reached out further, trembling fingers almost brushing against him. "Hold on to me. Fight back. The shadows churned and hissed, angry at her defiance. She will lead you only to despair, they warned, voices overlapping in a harrowing harmony. Join us, Ethan. Be free. No. He screamed, the sound bolting through the air, cracking like glass. Mom, I don't want to. Tears streamed down Jessica's face, blurring her vision. Desperation fueled her as she forced out her next words. I love you, Ethan. And I will always fight for you. The darkness quaked around them, a last-ditch effort to snare her soul, and with it, Ethan's shattered trust. She felt their grip loosening, just for a heartbeat. Please. Jessica hollered, feeling the edges of her reality starting to fray as the shadows pulsed back, trying to swallow her voice. Come back to me. All at once, the faces of the other children morphed into something grotesque. Their once innocent features twisted with fury, a chorus of shadows shrieking in unison, "Join us." Jessica stumbled, her mind spinning, but she planted her feet, tapping into the motherly love that pulled at her very core. She lunged again, heart pounding as her fingers grazed Ethan's arm. I am your mother. She yelled against the whirlwind of chaos. I gave you life, and I can take you out of this nightmare. As their hands grasped, she felt a surge of warmth. Signaling the flicker of hope she had been searching for, his grip tightened, the warmth battling against the oppressive cold of the shadows. But the darkness did not relent so easily. It roared with rage, gathering in volume and despair, shifting the very air around them. The eldritch whispers coiled, wrapping painfully around Jessica's throat, "She will betray you. Let go." But Jessica surged forward, pulling Ethan toward her, feeling the violent ripples of resentment clawing at them. Stay with me. She pleaded, her entire being focused on the warmth coursing through her veins, a flicker of hope flickering against darkness. Then she saw it, a sliver of pale light at the very edge of the swirling vortex behind them. It glimmered like a shooting star, and in it, she sensed freedom waiting, just out of reach. The shadows howled one last time, desperate to claim what they had lost. Jessica's heart thundered, a chilling contrast to the chaos around them. In the crossroads of despair and hope, she made a choice. Together. She screamed, clenching Ethan's hand tighter. Would they push through the shroud of darkness, or would the portal shut, trapping them forever? In that instant, the shadows surged forward, breaking against her resolve. But would love be stronger than the dark? As Jessica and Ethan stood at the precipice of eternity, the fate of their souls hung in the balance, a question echoing in the void around them: what would they have to sacrifice to escape? Jessica's heart raced as she clutched Ethan's hand, the bond between them swelling with life against the encroaching shadows. The howls faded into the background, becoming a bitter whisper as they stood on the brink of everything, their fates tangled like threads in a dark tapestry. Together. She cried out with all the strength she could muster. The shadows roared in defiance, their power swirling like a tempest around them, but she focused only on the warmth of Ethan's palm, the solid weight of his presence anchoring her against the chaos. In one powerful motion, she pulled him toward the flickering light at the edge of the void. It beckoned them, shimmering like a promise of safety, of a world where shadows couldn't reach them. We can do this, Ethan. Just a little closer. Ethan's determination filled the space between them, lighting the way even as the darkness closed in. I'm here, Mom. His voice rang out, clear and unwavering. It was the voice of her son, the one who had loved dinosaurs, who had laughed at her silly jokes, and she would do anything to protect that love. As they surged forward, the shadows surged against them with renewed fury, clawing at the base of their resolve. The howling grew louder, desperate to pull them back into despair. You can't escape. Join us. Echoed all around, morphing into an agonized wail. The despair of the lost could be felt, drawing tears from her eyes. No. Jessica shouted, gritting her teeth, forcing herself to run, to hold on, to fight. It felt like they were running through sludge, every movement a struggle as the darkness clawed at their ankles, threatened to tear them apart. But the flicker grew brighter, stronger. It was their salvation, their hope. "Keep going." Ethan's voice, with its young power, broke through the din. He seemed to glow against the darkness, his innocence radiating the light they so desperately needed. Just a few steps more. Just a little closer. As they neared the portal, Jessica could feel the darkness slip, its grip loosening. The whispers began losing their hold, retreating with their shrieks dissolving into the ether. "I love you, Ethan," she screamed, tearing through the suffocating air, wings of hope sprouting to carry them forward. And in that transformative moment, the light burst forth around them, enveloping them in pure brilliance. The shadows shrieked, twisting into fleeing tendrils as Jessica and Ethan breached the threshold together, merging into a space filled with warmth. A flash of white light engulfed them, blinding yet sweet, liberating from the chains that had threatened to bind them to despair. Jessica gasped as the world around them shifted, colors blooming like vibrant flowers in springtime. The terrifying school vanished in the wake of pure radiance, dissolving the darkness in a cacophony of fleeting whispers. She and Ethan landed back before their home, hearts racing, the air fresh with promise. "Mom!" He threw himself into her arms, warmth flooding her entire being. The coldness of the shadows felt like a distant nightmare, receding behind the dawn of their reunion. A whoosh of fresh air filled their lungs as they held each other tightly, fear melding seamlessly into relief. "We did it!" Ethan exclaimed, eyes bright. "We fought them off." "Yes, we did. We're free." Jessica beamed, utterly exhausted but filled with endless resolve. But as she looked around, she felt hesitation creeping in. Had they truly escaped? What lingered behind the veil? Would the darkness ever truly let go? "Mom?" Ethan's voice trembled, pulling her from thoughts that began to darken their victory. "Are we safe now?" "Here is safe, Ethan. You're safe." Her voice was strong, fully committed to their home, their sanctuary. But just beneath the surface of her smile, she felt the shadows lurking, the unresolved promise of challenges ahead. Little did they know, the nightmares could still echo through dreams. What they had encountered was a fragment of something sinister that existed beyond walls, something that might always linger just out of sight. They needed to be vigilant, but now they stood united, a fortress against the darkness. Together they could face whatever shadows may come. Love could be a fierce weapon. With that thought of being together, standing tall against any storm, Jessica opened the door to her home, ready to create new memories, each filled with vibrant laughter that could outshine any darkness. She turned to Ethan, a smile breaking like dawn. "Ready to make some breakfast?" His little face lit up with joy. "Pancakes?" "Pancakes it is," she laughed, taking his hand once more, pushing against the shadows behind them. Today marked their triumph, a day to fill with light. As they stepped inside, she whispered a promise into the ether: "We will never forget, but we will always fight for what's right." Even in the face of darkness, their bond remained unbreakable, a promise of hope renewed. Now, it's your turn. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm so that more tales like this can reach those who need them. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this mind-blowing ending. And please don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Let us keep exploring the dark corners together, because every story matters.